Hello, my name is Alejandro Rodriguez, and I will talk about the main challenges that we are facing right now on understanding clinical notes and why it's necessary to invest technical efforts and research efforts on solving these problems, as the understanding of the clinical notes and the application of natural language processing to the clinical notes, it's a very important issue and a very important problem that needs to be tackled in order to being able to enhance and improve the current knowledge that we have about diseases, and I think that this is something really special nowadays with the current COVID-19 situation. So first of all, I would like to start mentioning the profile of the data scientist. The data scientist is, as we can see, someone that extracts insights from messy data. So we are assuming that, for example, when we are dealing with clinical notes, when we are dealing with electronic health records, we have some data that came from very different ways and in very different forms. Indeed, I will show some examples of these types of data and types of information that comes sometimes in a messy structure or in a messy form, some others in a more structured way, but that lacks and needs the processing of this information in order to be able to extract the value, to extract the insights that we have in the knowledge that it's hidden. So the data science aim, it's as I said, basically going from the data to the knowledge and finally trying to make impact, from this insight and this wisdom. The idea is that being able to tackle the problem of extracting relevant information and relevant knowledge from the data, we are able to make an impact. And this is something really important, and more specifically in the health sector. So some of the characteristics that health data has are these ones. It's complex, the structure not always it's the same. We have variety of formats, specific concepts. Sometimes it's multilingual. We have interoperability issues that indeed is one of the main problems that we have, different devices. So all these characteristics applies to the health data as well as to other data in other sectors. But this is something that is really important. So all these characteristics let us, let's say, convey into this concept of big data that it's nowadays so popular. And also we have the problem of the regulation. We have in Europe the GDPR, that it's something that we need to take into account, because the personal data that the health data has, it's important to be addressed in a proper way in order to fulfill the regulation. So different data in healthcare sector. So for example, we have here an example of an ACG. We have some examples of different medical images that are different formats that need to be processed. We have, for example, ultrasound information. We have genetic data. So the thing is that health data is complex. It has different types, and all the information that we can process and we can extract value from them, it's important in order to being able to take decisions. My colleague Ernestina will focus more on the textual part, that it's the only one that I didn't mention here, but I prefer to let her explain a little bit more about the specific challenges that the textual data, that it's the one that comes in this case from electronic health records, has, and the potential impact that it can have on different diseases. Just to finish, I would like to mention that another of the important problems that we have, it's the interoperability issues and the standardization. So here what I show, it's just a few examples of the different types of vocabularies, metathesaurus or taxonomies that we are using in health sector. For example, ICD from the World Health Organization, UMLS, disease ontology, MES that it's used in a more specific way of in terms of literature or librarians, SNOMED-CT that is also a part of the UMLS and that allows us to create complex concepts. The importance of showing all this here, it's basically the problems that we have, and is that the standards are proliferating because, well, we are always trying to to have only one, and the situation is that finally we have 15 competency standards. And this is something that needs to be also tackled, because just to finish and before letting my colleague Ernestina continue with this part, I would like to emphasize that the problem of the standards, and more specifically the problem of the interoperability, it's a real problem. Indeed, in the COVID-19 pandemic situation, we were able to see at the very beginning that the sharing of the data was really difficult among even among states in the same country, and just not to mention among different countries, or even, for example, about among the public and the private sectors. And this is something that is really important to tackle, because the idea of the big data and the idea of having a data scientist being able to work with this type of data, it's on the basis that we are able to have access to large amounts of data from different populations, from different regions, from different states, and this is something that needs to be tackled from a standard and interoperability perspective. So from my side, that's all. I would like to introduce now my colleague Ernestina, that will explain a little bit more about the main technical issues and challenges that we are facing in the context of natural language processing and the clinical notes. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandro. And what happened in the middle of all this research that we have been developing regarding how to extract information from just medical records, that March 2020 was just a milestone because the coronavirus pandemic was declared. At this moment, all the doctors started having new patients with new symptoms, with new signs of a completely new disease that was the COVID-19. So all this information regarding all the new symptoms, the new signs, the new toxicities, the treatment that were going to be applied to all these patients was being stored in the electronic health records as clinical narratives written in a very specific way, because it was just being recorded by different clinicians in different languages, and also in a situation that was in a stress moment, because the patients were coming very quickly just because of these pandemics. So all the information that was being kept, as we can see in the slide, it was that the clinician is just analyzing and just putting into the clinical records all the information regarding what happens prior to the disease, after just being diagnosed the disease, which are the treatments the patient is having, which is the monitoring that they are having if the patient goes to intensive care units, when the patient has been admitted to the hospital, how many days the patient has stayed in hospital, so on and so forth. So at this moment, it was much more evident that we need tools to understand all these clinical narratives. So all the efforts that we are having are just not enough, and we have just to put a lot of effort just to understand all these narratives in which we were having new information of a new complete disease. So the first thing that we have to do in the natural language processes in order to extract the information is, first of all, to generate the annotations. We need just to be able to extract from all these narratives all the symptoms, all the signs, all the diseases, anything that is of interest of the disease has to be just extracted from the text. Once we have all this information, that we have performed the recognitions of the entities on the narratives, then what we have is we have to be able to relate the annotations. I mean, we have to be able just to know not only if the patient has coughing and has fever, but we have to be able to know if the fever comes before the coughing or just right after the patient has a certain treatment. Also, something important is that sometimes when writing a document, what happens is that we put negations. We can say that the patient is not having fever, or for example, we can have a speculation. In the case that the patient suffers fever, we will do this or this other thing, and this has to be also detected. That's why we say that we need tools to understand narrative. It's not to index the text, it's not only to extract all these entities out of the text, but also just to understand really the meaning that has been written in the narratives. And once we have all this information and everything has been understood, then we have to normalize all the information so it can be put just to services for clinicians and for the public in general, in order to extract knowledge and to extract decisions and make decisions based upon this knowledge. So which are the approaches that we have in order to annotate, to relate, to do all this process that we are mentioning? mentioning. So on the one hand, we have the rule-based methods that has shown always to be very interesting, which is the main thing that we have with rule-based. As we know, a regers, a regular expression, is something that we know and that we define for a certain way that something is being written. So as soon as something is always written in a certain way, then this approach will find this part on the test. But the thing is that those things that we have not thought about and we don't really know how they are written, or as soon as something is slightly different from the regular expression, then it will not be found. So that's why machine learning approaches in which we learn from the text are the ones that are outperforming now and that are being applied. But which is the main problem that we have with machine learning approaches, and in particular with deep learning, that are showing to be the ones that are really having good results? The thing is that with deep learning, we need just annotated corpus. So, and this is something that, as we are going to see, is something that is not there because we have the clinical narratives, but they have not been annotated. On the other hand, the regular expressions-based approaches, what we need is that for new concepts, we need new annotators. So what we have been just analyzing is which is the way that we can generate this annotated corpus in a more efficient way, because the thing is that the only way is that they have to be annotated by different annotators, and then an agreement has to be found, and this generation process takes a long time. Okay, so the thing is that in our lab, in Medal Lab, at Centro de Tecnología Biomédica, Universidad Politécnica de Madrid, the approach that we are following is that we have a system that was based in regers expressions in order, in principle, we are working on the oncological domain. So by just doing the manual annotation of certain clinical records together with some approach based on regular expressions, we are able to annotate a corpus. With this annotated corpus, this is being the input for the deep learning approaches. Applying the deep learning approaches, we get the annotations that finally we apply certain refinements and certain post-processing, not only for dates, that this is something that has to be pretty analyzed, because we have not only to find dates that are explicit, but also dates that are implicit, such as 2 days after the treatment was being applied, or things like this. So all this post-processing is done, and after all this, the natural history of the patient is reconstructed, and we know exactly when the disease was diagnosed, what symptoms were coming prior to the diagnosis, what things are happening after the diagnosis, and in particular, all the things of the natural history of the patient. So the conclusion is that NLP, of course, is a very useful tool to extract all the knowledge from the records. The thing is that deep learning approaches that are showing to be the best performance and outperforming in any method require annotated corpus, and that's why a lot of research, a lot of efforts has to be put in order to generate these annotated corpus that are just a priority. And despite the effort that all the community is putting just to extract the knowledge, and to have methodology, of course, we have to put a lot of effort just to make this a reality. That's why all these initiatives like this that has been organized today, this hackathon that we have, is very interesting in order to develop new methods, new technologies, and to generate the awareness that new methodology and techniques are required. So thank you for just inviting us to participate and to have this slot here, and just enjoy the day. Thank you.